how do we force change? I think that's the question that everybody is asking themselves right now. How do we make this change? Because, man, that is a tough and a loaded question because I feel like we've been asking for change for a long time. We've been demanding change for a long time. But there's a reason that that change hasn't happened yet. There's a reason that the system does not work for the people who keep it running. That's because we have no leverage. We have no way to hold them accountable, to ratchet up the pressure. Because the old ways of ratcheting up the pressure don't work anymore. They really don't. Because the corporations are the ones that control the politicians, and the politicians are only in it for themselves. So when we are asking ourselves, how do we create change? Well, we have to put pressure on politicians, right? But how do you put pressure on politicians when they don't care about us, when they're not beholden to us? Well, we have to figure out, who are they beholden to? If the politicians don't care when we start saying, change this, who will they listen to when we start saying, change this? And Bertie, you are all right. You are completely correct. We need to say, screw this. We are not participating until it works for us. Because the only way this car drives forward is if we push it. But every single time we push this car of an economy forward, it runs over us. That's what we are saying. And then every single time we say, what the heck is going on? We're the ones that do the hard work, but you're actively trying to screw us over. Nothing ever changes. Number one, because they blame us for it. But it's really because we don't have enough savings to force them to change, right? Because what actually causes change? All of us saying, we are done pushing this car. We are done doing all the hard work and getting stepped on. Because that's essentially what it is. Think of the economy as all of us pushing this car forward. Well, it only moves forward if we do the hard work of pushing it, right? But every time we push it forward, we get run over. Then we're talking to the people in charge, the people that are driving the car, saying, hey, we're the only reason that you're moving forward in the first place. Could you stop running over us? But here's what it is. We're trying to do that. We're trying to say, look, we demand change. We demand change. But we don't have any leverage. Because they know. What are you going to do? Not go to work? What are you going to do? Not buy food? Not pay your rent or your mortgage? They know that we cannot stand up against them because we depend on the very people that we are protesting against for what we need to live. Because even if 100 million of us protested tomorrow, well, we'd still go buy all our groceries from the same people we're protesting against. And usually politicians would change things when enough of us demanded it, right? When enough of us demanded it. But right now, they don't work for us. So it doesn't matter how many people demand it because they know, their need to eat will outweigh their anger. Their need to have housing will outweigh their anger. Yeah, they'll be mad for a little bit, but what are they going to do? They have to go back to work to afford food. They have to go back to work to afford housing. And then we don't have enough savings to demand change, to push back against them. And then they tell us it's our fault, right? They tell us it's our fault. And that's why we drop the me's in the chat. I appreciate that because everybody thinks we did something wrong, that it's our fault, that dang, if we only had a little bit more security, we'd be able to go and protest for a little bit longer. We'd be able to go and do something about it. But we don't have any security whatsoever. Because that's what I keep asking myself is, damn, I want to do something about this. What can we do to fix this? How can we make our voice heard that this is not what we want? Well, it used to be, right? We go protest because the politicians cared about us. They listened to us. So when we all spoke up at the same time and said, fix this, when we said jump, they jumped. But for the last 20 years or so, we have not been the ones funding their campaign, right? The corporations are the ones that fund the politicians' campaign, and the politicians will always be beholden to the people that fund their campaign because that's how they got their job. Well, Rhonda, we have a little bit of an idea. It's just that we've got to square in on the diagnosis, which is greed. It's not one single entity. It's not one single thing that is causing this or going to fix this. Kyle, that would go a long way. But when the media is against us, when the politicians who passed it are in the pockets of the corporations, that's what's difficult, right? Because what's so crazy is that, think about this. If every single community in America controlled their own food and controlled their own health care, well, when those communities want to demand change, we would all say, oh, well, we're going to go to the streets and demand change. We don't need this corporate system because our community controls the food. Therefore, for as long as we need to protest, we're going to protest for because we know we're getting our food from the community. That's it. That's all that we would need, right? It's us being in charge of what we need to live, of our food, of our healthcare, of our housing. Because we are not in charge of that, we don't have any leverage to force change. We don't have any leverage to tell them what we want. And then they make it feel like it's our fault, right? Corporations don't care about you. Corporations actively screw you over. Every single one of us has had that job where we busted our ass, saw the company's profits go up and up, and then our salary stayed the same. And then when we ask for a raise, not because we're greedy, not because we want to be rich, but because we want to have a little bit of cushion. We want to have a little bit more savings each and every month. Because what that would do is that would give us some security and we do better at our jobs, right? But because corporations recognize that there's absolutely no competition for them, they don't pay us enough to live. And when they don't have to pay people enough to live because there is no competition, then nobody has any savings. And then when we need to go spend a week demanding change, we can't do that. Kyle, that's the first step to waking up enough people to recognize that it's not just buying and working strikes. Because here's what we thought is like, yeah, that would be great. But if the corporations always know that that is temporary, because what do we buy the most? Every month we spend money on our rent and our mortgage. That goes to the banks and large corporations usually. We all go to the grocery store to buy food. The majority of the food that we buy is from large corporations. We all pay our health insurance every single month. That goes to large corporations. And then not only that, if we want any of the trappings of a modern life, if you want internet, any streaming service, anything like that, then we have to get it from corporations. But Kush, you are exactly as obviously, you know where we're going with this. So the first step isn't just to stop buying, because stopping buying without building only does so much. So not only do we have to stop buying, but we have to build the things that we can only buy from them. Like, this is a silly example. I think a lot about power and energy. So not only did a town in England buy their own windmill, I saw something else that was even more magnificent. They took a regular river and just made it a little, it was completely nature friendly, but it's this tiny mini hydroelectric dam, basically, where the water from the stream spins the turbine, and then that spinning turbine powers like 15 homes in the area. So these are the kinds of things that communities can start owning, that, yeah, it's not going to be a fix for everyone right away, but every single time that we can remove ourselves from the system, even by a couple percent, that's what we do. So some places start food buying groups and start saying, hey, we were able to get our food before grocery stores. The main reason that corporations came in and sold us on the idea of grocery stores was because we were not as connected 50 and 60 years ago. So it was tougher going to the local market. We were more dependent on what the farmers had. Well, when the corporations came in, they said, hey, rather than just being dependent on one or two farmers, we'll get you all the food in your area and bring it to a central location. And we were like, oh, that's cool. And it worked for a little while, right? But now we have even more means to communicate amongst ourselves, right? We've got the internet. We are way more advanced than we were 50 or 60 years ago. All that we need to do is go back to what we used to do, connecting with the people in our neighborhoods that had what we need. Because if every single one of us was growing food in our yard and was connected with farmers and food producers in our area, if every single one of us was connected with doctors and healthcare services that were community-based, that cared about us, not profit, if every single one of us had our, housing secured, because housing should be a human right for people, then what would we be able to do? We'd be able to go to the streets for as long as we fucking want. Because we would control where our food comes from, because we would control our housing, because we would control our healthcare. And then it doesn't matter what else is going on. When enough people get pissed off, they can actually change things. What is the only thing stopping us from doing that right now? I think a lot of us would go do that and demand that change. But we absolutely can't, because we don't control our food. We don't control our housing. We don't control our healthcare. So they know that no matter how angry we get, they just have to wait us out until we get hungry and say, my kids need to eat, so I need to go back to work. We say, my housing needs to eat. No, my housing needs to be paid, so I need to go back to work. So what we're talking about here, Blackhawk, appreciate that, is how people want to see change, whether they want to see economic change, whether they want to see political change, but it all starts to the people having leverage. And the people need to have leverage to put pressure on the people that are actually in charge. Well, in the past, we used to put pressure on the politicians. And since the politicians worked for us, they cared about it when we all said, change, we demand change. But now that the corporations are the ones that essentially own the politicians, they're the ones that fund their campaigns. So that's who the politicians listen to. No matter how much the people of America say, change, we demand change, it will never happen, because politicians work for corporations, not us. So that doesn't mean we can't have influence. It just means that the equation has changed a little bit. So rather than just protesting and putting pressure on the politicians, we need to figure out how we put pressure on the corporations, because the corporations are the ones in charge of the politicians. Now, the corporations have put pressure on us for decades. Thank you for that, for the dropping that Earthling. We dropped the me's because even though the corporations have been ratcheting up the pressure on us for decades, they make it feel like it's our fault. They call us lazy. They call us stupid for not being able to budget, when really those assholes have frozen our wages for decades and we don't have enough money to live. So why is it that a company would freeze your wages for decades? Well, because that's when they're not afraid that their customers will leave to go somewhere else, right? Walmart is never afraid of their customers leaving to go somewhere else. So Walmart doesn't need to pay that employee enough to put a fake smile on and say, "How you doing today?" Because Walmart knows that no matter the attitude that you get that from that employee, which we don't, we don't fault them for, by the way, they're not getting paid enough, minimum wage, minimum effort. Then they know that, well, that customer's never going to walk out and go shop somewhere else, right? So why would we pay our employees a little bit more to smile at our customers if our customers are going to shop here, whether our corporations smile at them or not, or whether our employees smile at them or not? And then they figured out that if we don't have any money, we can never say no to the boss. That's the big one, right? The only way that you would work 2 weeks straight without a day off is if the boss is like, "I need you to work this shift," or I don't know if we can keep you at the company anymore. Well, you're like, "Shit, I have to go now because I need this job for my housing. I need this job for my food." So what they did was they got rid of all the competition, so they never had to raise our wages. Then slowly after the 2 decades, the cost of living, because it goes up with inflation every year, eventually is right near where our salary is. So the most that we can save every single month is 100, 200, maybe $500 a month if we're lucky. So the majority of Americans don't have any savings. They certainly don't have 6 months of savings. And only having 3 months or 6 months of savings is what's going to make you secure enough to say, "Hey, system, we are not participating in this until you change." Because that's the only thing that causes real change, is to have the leverage to demand change. The analogy that I was making is like the economy is like a car. We all need to push that car. Yeah, the CEOs and the executives and the politicians are the one driving that car, but that car doesn't move forward unless we push it. Sorry for the drum. Unless we push it. And then we're all like, "Okay, well, we all recognize that we need to push this car. Everybody needs money. Let's go push the car." And then every single time that car runs over 20% of us, 30% of us. Say, "Oh, you're supposed to be looking out for us." What the heck? Well, right now, none of us have the ability to say, "We are not pushing the car until you stop running over us." And that's what I think a lot of it is so many of us right now are like, "We want change. What the F is going on? We push this car. You need us for all this." But every single time we push this car forward, boom, we get stepped on. John Juana, I think that's the exact question that we're trying to answer. Because I definitely don't think that we need 40 or 50 million agreeing on something. I think we need to build, I think that people just don't have another option besides the corporate option. And if we had a corporate option, if we had a non-corporate option, I think the majority of people would take that. But we have no other option than the corporate option, and it's designed that way. So what we need to figure out first is that what is it that actually gets something done? How do we demand change? Well, we can only demand change when we have power. We used to have power because politicians worked for us. Also, the media was for the people. The media's job was to keep us in the same reality. Now the media's job is for profit, and its job is to separate us, because the more that we are not in the same reality, the more that we will not see what the actual problem is. So what we've got to do first is understand that everybody needs the same thing: food and housing and healthcare. And we move forward with a movement that said all humans need the same thing: food and housing and healthcare. So the communities, the people in the community that are producing that food, that are the healthcare providers, that are the doctors and the nurses, the people that are doing the work to build the buildings that we need, the community should be the ones that is in charge of that, because it's the community that needs that to live. A corporation needs it to make profit. We need it to live. And before, we used to control these things. We did. We controlled our food supply. Corporations came in and said, hey, we'll make this easier for you. Rather than having you to just depend on one single farmer, we'll go and source our food from 100 farmers, and you can always have the best of everything. And we said, okay, we don't see a problem with that. If these corporations ever get out of line, we have the media and the politicians. The media will tell us the truth, and the politicians will correct the imbalance. Then as soon as the corporations got control of what we need to live, they started working to take over the media and the politicians. So that's really all that's happened. It's happened with our food. It's happened with our healthcare. It's happened with our housing. And then anything else that becomes a staple of life. Cars have become a staple of life, right? Cars are not a product. They're a commodity. We need them to live. So corporations made sure that, well, first of all, corporations made sure that we needed cars. And then corporations made sure that they were the only ones that could produce this thing we need to live. Corporations are really good at their job. Their job is getting as much profit as possible. And they figured out, shoot, if we keep raising the price of radios and raising the price of carpet, people will just not buy radios or carpet. But if we keep raising the price of food, what are people going to do then? They have to buy food. If we keep raising the price of housing, then what are people going to do? They have to buy housing. If we keep raising the price of healthcare, then what are they going to do? They have to buy healthcare. So the first step then is understanding where the true power lies. The true power is in the corporations that control everything. And if what we need to do is go protest for a week or two, our most powerful thing that we can say or do is say, we are not participating until it stops screwing us over. That's it. It's like America is a giant car. It's like our economy is a giant car. And the politicians and the corporate executives are the ones driving it. But they need us to push it forward. Every single one of us. The companies are what makes up the economy. And all companies are is a bunch of employees. So they need us more than we need them. So we're the only ones that can push that car, right? So in every single time we push that car forward, the politicians and the CEOs run us over. So we say, hey, stop it, cut that out, cut that out. But they know that the only way that we can get our food and our housing and our healthcare is to rely on them. So even though they keep running over us, they know that we will always come back and push their car. I need to come up with a better analogy, but I'm close. Tickler, that name is hilarious. Yeah, but the system, so the destroy is the part that I would have an issue with. We need to build a parallel system that gives people an alternative. And if we make that alternative system better for people, we don't need to destroy anything or even convince anybody. At that point, the math does the work. Because I think there are so many people, whether on the left or the right, that you could call and be like, hey, these corporations are screwing us over in regards to our healthcare. We're going to figure out a better way to do it. So yeah, essentially, we're just going to go back to the system before corporations. All of us will pay our local doctors. We'll still use the hospitals for our emergency care, but there'll be a separate insurance for that, right? So there you go. Hey, grocery stores aren't working out for us anymore. There's about 100 of us all in this area that are getting together saying that we want to buy eggs from a farmer. If we find eggs from a farmer that we can get for the same price at the grocery store, would you don't have to do it all the time, but would you be down for buying eggs from this local farmer rather than from the grocery store? Hell yeah, right? Hell yeah. Because that's the only way that we're going to be able to take back control of what we need to live. Because this is the way things were. It's so funny. It's not like this is something new. This is what happened before corporations made these mega grocery stores that are in every single area. What it was is you relied on 2 or 3 or 4 farmers. You'd go to the different farmers markets, pick up what you needed, and you got your veggies for the week. But sometimes the veggies that you wanted weren't there, or they got sold out, or they were dirty, or maybe the farmer didn't have good customer service. So corporations came in and said, hey, rather than you going to these 4 farmers markets, what if we bought all the food from all these farmers and put it in one giant place for you to come by? Right? So we need to stop doing that. We need to stop supporting those corporations and go back to exactly what we used to do. Hey, rather than getting it from a corporation, we're going to get it from a farmer instead. Give me 1 second. My dog's barking. So we start by recognizing this, right? We start by recognizing what the problem is. The problem is greed. There's many layers to the problem, but it comes off that corporations don't care about us.